It's beautiful. Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here.
Adam here. Hello.
Hello. Adam Levy has joined us.
Yay!
And That Pedal Show, we do actually have a few pedals, but not many. Are just fantastic guitar, clean amp, fantastic human.
That'll do for today.
Yeah, there ends the lesson. We'll see you next week.
Beautiful. Oh man, thanks so much for taking the time to come and hang with us. This is really cool. Been looking forward to this.
Oh, right on. Me too. It's really my pleasure to be here.
In a big way. So Adam is joining us on the back of a tour with Liz Wright. Been over, you may know Adam from YouTube, you may know him from his previous life, which we will talk about throughout the show. But today's show, we just want to get a little bit of insight into some inspirational insight into the sounds that come out of the stuff you play, man, because it is,
Yeah, it's very moving.
Yeah.
it's great to have you here. Perhaps tell us a little bit about why you were in the UK, what you were doing in Europe.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have been on tour with an amazing singer, American singer named Liz Wright. We had a short tour, about 2.5 weeks across Europe. We played in the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Croatia, and we ended in London. We played in Cadogan Hall, which is a beautiful, spacious room. A lot of the rooms that we played in on this tour had been churches or synagogues before,
lovely.
and now have become music spaces. Yeah, so like Paradiso in Amsterdam is a space like that.
Beautiful.
And you're traveling with a full band as well, so getting a drum kit to work in a room like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tricky, but that's part of what we're doing. You know, that's what we do.
So Adam released a couple things last year, Spry and Spry Acoustic Sketches.
Come on.
Bingo.
There we go.
Exactly.
And this as the kind of solo part of your career, but of course before that and concurrently we have a rich history of working with plenty of artists as well.
Amazing artists.
Before we get into that, let's do the thing. Let's go back perhaps and talk about beginnings on guitar for you. How did it start?
Well, I always loved the sound of pop music that was on the radio. I was born in '66, so by the early '70s, I was pretty aware of music as a thing, you know, just driving around in the car with my mom and listening to AM radio. And at that time in music, guitar was everywhere. You wouldn't have a pop song that didn't have at least some kind of strumming and quite often a little guitar solo or some fills. Even like on Carpenter's songs, we don't think of the Carpenters as a guitar band, but there's some cool guitar stuff, you know, in there. So I kept hearing this sound, and then when I was old enough to get to play with the record player, you know, when my mom said, okay, you can try. The records that she had were later Beatles, like we had Abbey Road and we had Sgt. Pepper. I didn't know anything about Help or anything like that. I thought the Beatles like started with Sgt. Pepper. I thought that was their first record. And we had a Simon and Garfunkel record and Bill Withers. And those aren't necessarily guitar music, but there's plenty
of guitars
you know, Simon and Garfunkel, Beatles, Bill Withers, loads of guitar. Cat Stevens, great guitar. So I kept hearing this sound, but then we didn't have a guitar. We had a piano, and I couldn't connect the dots, really. Then I tried clarinet because my mom thought maybe I should play a band instrument. Couldn't find the music in it. And then I went to summer camp one summer and I heard people playing guitars. I got to pick one up and I thought, oh, that's great. And I somehow could get around a little bit.
Wow.
It made sense to me. I don't know why, but it did. And I came home and I told my mom about it and she said, oh, you know, I have a guitar. I said, what? I mean, at this point, I'm like 11 years old. My mom has never mentioned the guitar. And so she had taken lessons before I was born and stopped. And then So anyway, she tuned it up. She showed me what she remembered, and that was how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
No way. And where do you go from there then? Because clearly many years later, here we are with advanced harmonic knowledge and all of that. You didn't presumably just get on there and start hammering out bar chords, and that's where it stopped.
No. Well, so I got into bands in high school, and everybody was always better than me. I was always the kind of... so what I wound up getting to do was I played a lot of rhythm guitar, and I played any song that had like a guitar hook. I got to play the hook. So I had a real sense of like, okay, music is about rhythm, and it's about little bits of melody. I never thought I would take a guitar solo ever. I just like to be that guy in the band. But then around the same time, like, I'm curious, like, is there more to learn besides these pentatonic boxes and bar chords and stuff? And growing up in Los Angeles, I knew people who had studied with Ted Greene, even
Wow.
'cause I not teenagers, but the guy who worked at the guitar shop in my town was studying with Ted. And so I got one of his books, and I was curious, and I took some lessons from another guy who showed me, let me get into standard tuning. I studied with the guy at the loal guitar
sorry,
shop.
my
No,
fault.
it's all right. No. And, he showed me like 13th chords and 9th chords and, just like, those kind of sounds, which I thought were great. That's part of it. I also took a few lessons. My grandfather was a musician, and the guy that he always hired for his sessions was a guy named Jimmy Weibel, who, I don't know if you know his name, a brilliant guitar, wrote a bunch of literature for the guitar that I don't have at my fingertips right now, so I won't try to play one, but very much about counterpoint.
Oh, wow.
And very modern jazz sensibilities, even though he started doing this, in the 60s. So one thing that Jimmy Weibel showed me, and I might have been 12 or 13, I barely knew my bar chords, but he showed me what maybe we would call block chords, something like this. You would learn those if you went to study jazz, but he would break them apart. So instead of playing like I just played, he would have me do things like... And then you start to realize, oh, there's melody there. It's not just chunks.
That's well cool.
And lots of variations on that,
Yeah.
But that was a big takeaway for me. It got me playing with my fingers instead of with a pick. It got me seeing chords not just as these kind of grips, but as something that was alive. And so that was a big thing. And so just in my curiosity to learn all the stuff that there was to learn, because it seemed like with pentatonics and stuff, all you could learn was vocabulary, but there wasn't like...
Harmonically more to... Yeah.
Right.
I'm always interested by that because so many guitar players, asking for a friend, have no understanding that there is life beyond that because we're into Led Zeppelin or we're into 145 Blues or whatever it is. I'm always fascinated by how one hears that more interest in the harmonic, but I guess it's just something that happens. You can't really explain it when you're 14, 15 years old.
I mean, well, one thing for me, I mentioned my grandfather was a musician, and he was the first guy that I ever jammed with. Like when I could get around on the guitar, I'd say, well, let's play. But he didn't know any Beatles songs. The songs that he knew were the songs from when he was a teenager, which would have been the 30s, 40s, So to him, like, Irving Berlin was pop music.
Yeah.
And so I learned those songs and I learned to read. So I got a folio of songs from the 30s and 40s, and I learned to read music so that, really so that I could play with him. And that's
cool.
Yeah. And that's really, even though he wasn't a jazz guy, he's a really important part of how I got into jazz, because playing those songs, even if you're not improvising or whatever, you still get this awareness of, oh, the bridge could go to a whole new key. Or the melody isn't always a note in the chord. The melody could be a color tone, like the 9 or the 13 or something. And it was just, that was the language of music then.
And he wasn't just a musician, was he? He was a pretty serious dude by all accounts.
Yeah. He was an arranger, worked in television for many, many years. Yeah.
I do find it very interesting that unless you are brought up with the knowledge of everything that came before, there tends to be a bit of an arrogance with modern music and harmonic concepts, and we think, oh, this is all amazing. But actually, if you go back, nothing's new, nothing's original. It's all been done before. And some of that stuff, like, if you start getting into big band arrangements from then, it's like, some of it is just absolutely mind-blowing and so harmonically rich and amazing. And being around horn sections, you know, that's why those dances and stuff are so popular, because there was so much going on, and it's just, then arrangers knew how to make you feel a certain way.
Yeah. That's really the kind of story that I feel doesn't get told enough. You know, we talk about, okay, here's Frank Sinatra, great, fantastic. Okay, here's the songwriter. It's Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. People know those names, but they might not know the names of the arrangers. Maybe they know who Nelson Riddle is because he's recognized. But all of my grandfather's friends were arrangers. That's who his gang was. And they used to get together every month at this restaurant in LA and have these big luncheons and roast each other. And I got to go to some of these, and it was, I don't think Mancini was there, but he was a friend of my grandfather. There was a guy named Frank Duvall, Gerald Wilson, who, do you know Anthony Wilson, the guitar player?
No.
He's incredible. He's played with Diana Krall for a long time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
His father was Gerald Wilson, who was an arranger that I knew through my grandfather. So I got to be aware at a young age of, like, oh, arrangers are actually, like you said, they're the ones that make you feel something. And even, you know, coming back to the Beatles, when you think of George Martin, part of what makes, you know, a lot of the Beatles recordings magical is the arrangements.
Totally.
You know,
Quincy Jones, absolute genius. Yeah. You know, the stuff that he did with Frank.
Right.
And what he did with those tunes, and what was the life that he brought out of those songs.
Yeah.
I just watched the We Are the World documentary last night.
Oh, okay.
Quincy doing his thing.
Yeah. Right.
Oh man. Yeah. Amazing.
There's a nice, almost a full circle there, because in guitar land anyway, perhaps those of us who stick on the 145 or go into playing pop songs or whatever, it feels at this point somewhat removed from the world of jazz. And I always shiver a bit when I say that word, because when we compartmentalize in that way, what we forget is exactly what you both just said. It's just music. And I think that brings us nicely full circle to the bulk of some of your career, where you end up playing songs with songwriters. So, sparing your blushes for a second, Norah Jones, Tracy Chapman, getting going. You've worked with Madison Cunningham and many, many others in a very, very song-oriented format. Was that always important to you, instead of just going down this rabbit hole of complex theory, to actually realize it through song? How does that meet?
Yeah. Well, one thing about jazz that I've only realized a little bit more recently as a grown-up is that, you know, part of it I was just curious about it because I wanted to know, you know, more about music. I was fascinated by it. Also, the other option when you're in high school, if you don't want to study jazz, is rock and roll. And it didn't resonate with me. Like, for whatever reason, the music that you're supposed to love as a teenager, it's like, it's made for you. Hey, we made this for you. I was like, I don't really get it. I wasn't into Zeppelin. I wasn't into Hendrix. I wasn't into anything like that. And part of it also, I think, was the social aspect. My friends would go to parties and come back to school on Monday, and they wouldn't remember their weekends. And I thought, I would rather be sitting home studying my drop 2 voicings and reading through chord chemistry. Partly, I was just a little bit afraid and turned off by rock and roll. So it wasn't just that I was curious about jazz.
Oh, it's a scary music.
To your question, Mick, about like how did I get with songwriters and how did that be? Basically, I never wanted to be the singer, and I never wanted to be the flash guitar player out front. I always thought that being part of the fabric of the music was the cool part. And like I said, in high school rock bands, I mostly played rhythm and then like hook lines. There was a song by a band called the Babies called Head First. It had this cool guitar line in it. Or we did Dancing with Myself, the Billy Idol song, and it has that. So those kind of little guitar hooks were the things that I was into. And as I said, I was listening to these Simon and Garfunkel records. We had Bridge Over Troubled Waters. We had Bill Withers. So I wasn't taking the music apart at that age, but I think it was programming. And after I graduated from music school, it was partly opportunity. Like, the jazz people that I had gone to school with weren't calling me for gigs, but the songwriters were like, hey, I've got a gig on Thursday. Do you want to play? And I had to kind of do a little bit of jazz deprogramming because nobody needs the Lydian dominant scale on a singer-songwriter gig.
I told you.
I think everyone needs it. They just don't know it.
So I had to learn to like, okay, I don't need to do all that stuff. I do need a capo.
Yeah.
And I need to learn to be an arranger in that way. Like, okay, what if you don't have the saxophones and trombones and stuff, but you're still trying to shape the music? If you're a singer-songwriter and you got a guitar player in your band, that's really that's the guitar player's job, is to be the horn section and is to do those things. Like, when I studied arranging in school, and there was all this. The teacher, his name was Dick Grove. He had a school called the Dick Grove School of Music. And I remember he would draw this thing he called the emotional curve. It's like, look, here's the tune. It's 4 minutes long. Let's look for how we want to shape it as an arranger. And, being mindful of what's already there in the song. And that's what we do. So all of it took me a while to kind of connect all of the dots, but it was like listening to those records and then studying arranging and also listening to Frank Sinatra records. And then here it is. I don't have the horns, but that's the job, so. When we talk about like solo jazz guitar, often the phrase chord melody is used. And it's really it makes, though just that phrase makes it seem like the chord is the priority. So here's your chord. And visually, your eye is going to, here's the root, which we all know from playing bar chords. I mean, that's how we do it. And then everything else is kind of like whatever. That's chord melody. But really, this note, if you just play this for somebody who's not a musician, if you just play this for your friend or your cousin or whatever, and say, can you sing that back to me? They're going to probably sing. That's how they hear it.
Yeah.
So why try to make music in a way that's fundamentally different than how it's going to be received? So if you think about melody first, then when you approach the like all-in-one guitar thing, you're prioritizing the thing that people are interested in music. And the other thing that they're interested in, which isn't, harmony is really at the bottom of what most people care about. The beat, can I move?
Yeah.
The melody, can I sing it? And then everything else is just emotion and energy. And that's what the arranging brings to it, is like emotion and energy. So I'll just try to think of like, there's can I play a little bit of a tune of mine? Okay.
Please.
So I'm going to turn the dirt on.
Yeah.
So this is a tune of mine called And They All Sang.
So really beautiful.
That was ace.
Wow, man.
I have to do one thing before we reflect on that. Is turn on the dB meter, because regular TPS viewers are going to be watching going, how loud is he?
How loud is he?
But there is a point in saying that. Could you give us just a few more bars of that, please, Adam, once this is fired up?
Sure.
Because one of the wonderful things that was happening is the interaction of this guitar and amp.
Yeah.
Giving all kinds of different harmonics
Yes.
in a lovely way.
Yeah.
Could we just have a couple bars just to show the people how loud it was?
So how loud was it?
You peaked at 95, so not super loud by TPS standards, but loud enough to feel it. Mm-hmm. I think that's important.
When I was learning, and I took some lessons with Ted Greene, and he really encouraged me to think about voice leading, because I think probably I went to him and I was young, and I was maybe playing something like All the Things You Are. This is a jazz standard, and just grabbing the chords that I knew. So the chords to that song are F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7, almost done, D flat major 7, G7, C major 7. That's the first 8 bars. So if you don't know a lot of options,
First 8 bars.
you're going to do something like this. And that's not bad. But it's probably not what the composer... Well, yeah, it's a lot of work. For one thing, you're going to wear yourself out. Suddenly you're playing tennis instead of, playing the guitar. But it's also not what... You're missing the point of what moves that music forward, which is there's lines inside it. So, I'm going to reduce it to a smaller sound. And then you can see the connectedness of it. And now I'll go back to bigger chords, but I'll keep all that stuff intact. So that's voice leading. Each note goes in a smooth place. Now, if you come from rock, you might say, I can't think that way. But it just hit me actually this morning. I was thinking about voice leading. Two of the most famous songs in all guitar are like... That's voice leading.
Yeah.
That is textbook voice leading. And voice leading. So you've been doing it since, since I was going to say, I'll censor myself, but you've been doing this ever since you've picked up the guitar, and it becomes, oh no, I can't do that because that's for this kind of player, and I'm this kind of player. And it's the same with chord melody chord. Like, there's no reason when I'm playing that I can't prioritize the melody.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. It's just you have to imagine yourself doing it, and then you do it.
Is there a better phrase for it than voice leading then? Because immediately that sounds something advanced. Have you ever come across a better phrase for it?
Great question, actually.
Yeah.
Because to me it just seems like melody.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly.
Movable, I don't know.
It's a tune.
It's, play the tune.
Play the tune. And then everything else is just for you or for the guitar players in the audience, I used to play this solo guitar gig in this cafe on Sunday mornings for a couple of years. And that also was really, from when I started that gig doing it, I was terrified. I brought my real book with me. If people don't know, the real book is it's a book with 500 common jazz songs in it that everybody gets when they go to music school. And I was terrified. I couldn't go to the gig without it because I thought I'm going to run out of music. So I brought that and I'm looking and I'm reading. Within 6 weeks, I realized, okay, that's pointless because I'm not going to connect with anybody doing that. They're just going to see this guy in the corner reading a book. So I stopped bringing the book and I said, I'm just going to play songs I know. And then I was trying to do all this heavy lifting and play the bass and the chords and everything all at the same time. And I got exhausted. It was a 3-hour gig. And I realized, what if I just played the melody and kept it grooving? And once in a while, I just suggest a bass note or suggest a chord. And nobody seemed to mind. Everybody was having a good time. And I realized, wow, you can play a lot less. People don't need you to spoon feed them the whole song. In a way, leaving some of it to their imagination is part of what we do.
And you demonstrated that earlier by, I think the phrase you used was, let me make this smaller.
Yeah.
By playing just maybe 2 or 3 notes of the chord rather than loads.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's about courage then, is it? Because here we are trying to show that we know the whole chord, and the courage is to go, no, I know what's important in this chord.
Yeah, because that's for you, right? If you're going, I'm going to show really complex stuff, that's not being musical and sharing music. That's saying, look, I'm really good. Check this out.
Yes.
And obviously there's times when it's beautiful and required, but if that's the focus of what's going on, it feels like it's very ego-led as opposed to it's a really beautiful melody here. Check this out, you know.
Right.
Because that's the thing that gets you, is that melody and that, and the rhythm and getting the feel and the groove of it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ironically, I studied with. I keep saying this because it's such a big. He's like the moon to me.
We want to get
with
into
Ted.
that with Ted, yeah.
But I'll say this happens to me. I always want to tell two stories at once, and I only have one mouth. So I'll come back to Ted, but the artist that I play with, Liz Wright, on her new record, we do a cover of this Cole Porter song called "I Concentrate on You." And when we were thinking about putting it on the record, she sent me a live recording of her and I doing it together. It's something that we were doing on the previous tour, just her and I. The band would take a break. And I listened to the live recording, and it was so complex what I did. It didn't sound bad. Like I was like, wow, that's really cool. But it was much more... there was a lot going on. And I almost listened to it and I thought, oh God, if we're going to make a record, I don't think I can even play like this. It's me, but at that point I'm on tour. We've been playing this song every night. I've got my confidence up. To go into a studio with the red light on and play the kind of way that I played on this just live board recording, I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I might need to hire a stunt guitar player to make the record. And when we went in to make the record of it, the arrangement actually got really simple. And I instead of playing jazz chords, it started with this. It's in G. She liked that as an intro. And then so I thought, what if I played the whole arrangement kind of in that way rather than trying to be Barney Kessel or something, And then it made more room for her to sing the song. And then they also, in the production of it later on, added a string quartet. And it left room for there to be a string quartet. And now when we play that song, we kind of do it in like folk chords, and why not? Cole Porter can handle it, So the story I was going to just say about Ted was that he always encouraged melody and groove. It's ironic that he's known for
the complex harmony stuff.
But what I remember in the lessons that I had with him is what wasn't that stuff. Sometimes he would really encourage me to just get to the point. What is the point of the music? And it doesn't need all that extra stuff. He liked that sound, and he could do it so easily that it didn't sound like work. I mean, that's part of it too. If you want to get into that level of harmonic vocabulary, it has to be as easy as a D chord. Otherwise, it's going to sound like you're always going to sound like you're chasing something. And Ted didn't ever sound like that.
I'm such a fan of his, and there's some really amazing things recorded. And there's a lecture that he gave, there's a bunch of them, but there's one lecture that he gave at a music school that's recorded really beautifully. And he starts on his telly, and he's just warming up, and everything just goes deathly quiet, and he's just sat there and he's playing for like 10 minutes, and then he realizes, oh, have we started?
Sounds like that.
He was just off.
Oh my God.
But he's just so beautiful. So how did he bring that stuff out of you?
A lot of it wasn't what he said. It was just being in the room with him, and when you're sitting this close to it and the Vibrolux is just there, it's unavoidable.
I love that.
The other things that I got from him, I think a little bit of the neck warble that I do comes from him. This kind of, I'm gonna just turn. It's gonna buzz a little bit. Is that
It's all good.
okay?
We
We're
encourage it.
in here with Strats until he's at 105 dB. We're okay with buzz.
This idea of letting each note, if you want to, go all the way out to the end, you know, instead of like there's a whole. I didn't even do it because I wanted to move to a new chord, but let me see if I can do. I don't know if that's really the best example. I'm just trying to show, like, some of his arrangements. Have you ever seen his handwritten arrangements?
Yeah.
So
I can't work him out.
right. So there's things just in his way that he wrote them that tells you something about the way he played, which was sometimes it's just black dots, and if it's all black dots, then you play everything at once. If there's black dots and then there's an X in there, the X is a melody note on the afterbeat. So it could be like this. You know, and again, these aren't necessarily Ted chords, but so that's one thing. And just that little thing, it seems small, but in any other book of jazz chords, there's no, nothing moves. There's just chunks.
Here's the chord.
Right.
Yeah.
So just that. And then he has another thing, which is really wild to see, but like here's one diagram and then the next one, and there'll be a line that connects the two almost like a sine wave looking thing. And what it is, okay, this note is held over from the previous chord. So like, okay, so that would be something like this. Holding the melody note. Going back to like all the things you are, like I played earlier. So. So I got off the rails a little bit there, but trying to show how something could hold over. It was a small thing, but it was Ted that showed me that. And it really made music feel like it had flow and forward momentum, and like we have a sustain pedal, which was only invented 3 or 4 years ago when they invented it.
But it also gets you out of that thing of that's the chord, and that's the chord, and that's the chord, right? Because you're having to go, okay, well, there's the melody, and I'm going to have to move those ones back and leave that one there. And then, so you've got to think, you have to think more linearly.
Yeah.
Yes. And think ahead. A lot of times it's about setting up a nice landing. It's not like, oh, I've painted myself into a corner, now what? I mean, we need to know that because we are going to paint ourselves into corners, and we need to have ways to go forward. But a nice thing about working out solo guitar arrangements is time stops. And you can actually look ahead. Okay, I really want to get to this beautiful sound on this chord. How do I set that up? Yeah. And that's so much of how music actually works anyway. It's when you write music, you don't just write a chord and then sit around and think about what comes next, or melodically. You know, you don't write, okay, this is, I want to write a song, I'll start on C. What next? Like you hear a phrase and then you hear more, and then you think about how maybe for the next section of the song you want to go somewhere else and then bring it back. So you learn to kind of think farther out ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like it has more in common with classical music at that point, because the distilled version of it might be, if you're trying to get your head around this playing, something moves and something stays. Is it as simple as that?
You're coming up with the lines today.
No, but
I'm
because it is. If you're coming at this from outside, which and I don't mean outside.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're coming from it with limited harmonic knowledge, let's put it that way, to even start to think about it is a challenge.
Yeah.
But instead of going, it's an A, it's a D, it's an E, it's a D, it's an A, it's like, okay, well, something in here has to move and something has to stay.
Yeah.
Then you get into economy of movement, then you get into having to know different. Maybe it is a sort of cycle back to that thing of you really do have to do the work, right? Because you need to know where the notes are, and that's the bit where we all slam the brakes on and go,
hang on, no, I'm not for that.
But yeah, me being, like I said, kind of a shy kid and a little bit afraid of rock and roll was probably good fortune, because it got me more alone time and more patience to discover these things and try to follow them, farther down, and not just get to like, oh, wait, I've got to do what? No, that's not for me. Yeah.
As if by magic.
And as if by magic, an acoustic guitar appeared. We were in the flow of doing something, and something changed. So we thought, well, let's change. Let's go with it rather than against it.
Yeah.
Dan does have a couple of questions.
I do have a couple of questions.
He's been saving up in the half an hour that's elapsed.
Yeah.
But also to say, Adam, you do a lot of stuff on acoustic guitar as well, including the acoustic version of Spry, the most recent release.
Yeah.
Is your brain in a different place? How do you approach the acoustic guitar compared to the electric guitar?
It is a different place. I'm trying to think how I can explain it. With the electric guitar, obviously the sustain is a big part of it, and all the stuff that I was doing before with the chords, like, it doesn't work quite the same way on acoustic when you have all of this sort of compression and sustain on tap. Here, it's like it's a much more finite resource, sustain, but you have to find like where the dynamic range, like basically you have to redefine where your dynamics are. That's a big part of it. I use the acoustic guitar at home mostly as a writing tool. I don't play out on acoustic gigs that much, although on tour with Liz, I do play a lot of acoustic because I'm replicating stuff that's on a record. So if it's an acoustic song on the record, I tend to play acoustic live. It's nice live because it occupies a different space. When you pick up an electric guitar, you are kind of claiming a lot of frequency space.
Right.
And when you pick up an acoustic guitar, you're claiming more rhythm space, usually. So that's
Is that because of the percussive nature of it and that lack of sustain?
Yeah, you're basically playing a big shaker with, with
springs.
and a frequency spectrum that's shifted up considerably, well, potentially and down, but certainly taken out of that mid-range area.
Yeah, but it works out to be nicer for stuff ringing over. Like, I know on an electric guitar sometimes it kind of gets too loaded. Like, if you like that sound of letting things ring, you really have to learn to control it with your right hand, otherwise it gets out of control. Whereas on acoustic, You know. Like all of that stuff is made for acoustic because of the envelope of the note and the frequency range. And then I pick up the electric, and I kind of want to play the same way, but it doesn't work quite the same way. So when I go back and forth, I have to learn to. Those are the adjustments I make in my head. Yeah.
I'm very proud to say that Adam is playing my Collings CJ35. We will mention the Collings electric guitar he was playing earlier, but yeah. So what's your go-to acoustic guitar at home?
I have two. I have a Collings DS2HASB. Can't you just picture it?
Does it have a 12-fret neck join? That
Exactly.
One? I've seen that guitar. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, it's a 12-fret guitar, slotted headstock,
Yeah.
Adirondack top, sunburst like this, and rosewood back and sides.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, because we know Collings make such awful guitars.
Yeah. So I've got that, and then I've got one at the far other end of the spectrum, which is a Waterloo 12-fret. It's the WLS. It's like a Stella, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a real dry, boxy guitar, and then I have sort of a concert piano in my lap with the other one. So they're nice to have as a pair.
Beautiful.
Dan, you had
I have two questions.
Okay, I'm all in.
In 3 parts, in 4 subsections. So, first question I have. When I hear you play, you've got your own thing. You don't sound like anyone else. There's a vibrato that you get in your movement, and like I can hear it like when I think of Norah Jones, and I can hear you all over that stuff, and the solo one Come Away With Me, and then you were talking before about Tracy Chapman and Give Me One Reason to Stay Here, and that's you. And it's like, how do you, as someone who's played with a lot of musicians, there's almost an expectation that you slot in, do something that works specifically with them. You know, you're expected to find the tones and everything that, whereas what you've been able to do is be yourself. And they've all heard you play and gone, I'll have some of that, please. How do you get to that place?
For me, it's a lot been, trying to not do the same things that everybody's doing. I moved to New York in 1996 because I was really attracted to like jazz records that I heard coming out of New York, stuff with Bill Frisell and Wayne Krantz, for example. But as soon as I got there, I realized like I can't play like that, really. Especially the more kind of, for lack of a better word, faster, aggressive. There's a kind of a muscular way that at New York, especially at that time, I realized, okay, I'm not going to be able to do that. So what am I doing already that is cool? How can I amplify that? And how can I try to just let go of the other things? So I knew that I like to play melodically and play like a singer. One of the things I had done even before I moved to New York was I would play along with records, and instead of trying to copy the guitar part, I'd actually listen to the singer and try to copy the phrasing, which really changes your focus.
Yeah.
Singers are going to be working in a lot smaller range than when we grab even just a basic pentatonic box or major scale box. It's 2 full octaves, and most vocal performances on a record are smaller than that. So it gets you thinking smaller way. It gets you thinking about vibrato in a different way. The way that singers use vibrato is so different from the way that guitar players typically do. It gets you feeling okay about repeating a line, which singers do all the time because the words change, and then it doesn't seem repetitive to the listener. But on guitar, we're a little bit afraid to play the same thing twice because that must be boring.
Right.
So sometimes, I started noticing like these were things that I tended to do. I'll play something, I'll play it again, or try to play a subtle variation on it as if there were new words to the same melody. And that was the stuff that I seemed to be good at, that when I looked around, everyone else wasn't doing. So I thought, okay, let me amplify that, try to let go of some of the other stuff. It's tricky. I still do some gigs where I feel like part of what I'm supposed to be doing is copy the part that's on the... If I'm on tour with somebody and they're doing something from 3 records ago where I wasn't involved, I use those as a starting point anyway. I'm not programming sound. I mean, you've seen my pedal board. You know I'm not programming sounds. But it's a good place to start, not so much in terms of copying somebody else's style, but coming back to like we were talking about arranging earlier, somebody has already worked out, here's where the vocal is, here's the drum pattern, here's the bass line. There may be more than one place for a guitar to operate, but somebody has carved out something that worked. So I'll always start there because it worked. And then I'll, little by little, over the course of a 2 or 3 week tour, each night, maybe try to bring it back a little bit more to my own sound. I think it's important if you want to be doing something like what I do, that you have to have something that you can claim as your own.
Do you think that's something that it's just really interesting to me how, when we sit down and work out a tune, it's like, okay, and we're trying to get it really close to the thing. It's actually how you bring that part of yourself and make it special, make it about you.
And who gives you the latitude? Who says, okay, you can stray this far?
Or
is that a situation that's presented
or are
itself?
you putting brackets on that yourself?
Both. I mean, ultimately, it's the artist's choice. But I am guilty of putting some of that on myself. I think more often I've been asked, like, to be more myself than be less like myself. That's
a compliment. That's wonderful.
Your mileage may vary, but that's been my experience. Like, so I would encourage people, if they're not sure about that, just at least see where the lines are. Don't work it out in your head like, this is...
presume where the line is.
Right.
Yeah,
Push it a little bit.
That's great.
And just watch what happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brace yourself, buddy. Pushing that line. So the other question I have is, your favorite Spinal Tap quote?
Have a good time all the time.
And you tucked that a little bit. Yep. To...
Have good time all the time.
So
it just got serious, people.
Yeah, because one of the things I've noticed about your playing is your time is so good that you can manipulate it to express different things. You can sort of push it a little bit and then lay back. I mean, I do the same thing, just not intentionally. But
you've never knowingly laid back.
I've never knowingly laid back. Do you think that's something that you can learn? Because harmony and all that sort of stuff, when it comes down to it, it's maths, right?
Right.
And you can work it out. But the massive part of that puzzle is time.
Right.
That's something I've always wondered, if it's something that you can actually learn.
So I think the answer is yes. And I also think it's one of those things that we touched on earlier, that some guitar players come up to that and they say, I don't want to do that. Because if you watch how drummers practice, it's a lot of time doing a simple thing. I'm just going to do this stroke, and they'll go to a practice room for an hour or 2 or 3. The drummers that I know that are really great, like I'm thinking of my friend Mark Stepbro. He's a session player in Los Angeles. Every morning, he has his cup of coffee and he goes to his practice space and he practices the most rudimentary things for a long time. And then only at the end of his long session of practicing that stuff he'll play songs. He'll put on a record and play along or stuff like that. And if you ask a guitar player, to just sit in a room with a metronome and go like, for hours in a day, most of them are going to like, no, that's not why I want this. But if you want to work on your time, I think that's some of the work that you have to do is sit with the metronome and what do quarter notes feel like? What do eighth notes feel like? What do triplets feel like? And then once you can play those, what's the dynamic range of that? Because that's when it starts to feel good. And the push and pull, being aware of it is really key. So just even knowing that that's a thing is key. Another thing, and I saw Wayne Krantz talk about this in an interview, when you're practicing time with a metronome, you have to record it and then listen to it. Because
analyze it.
The chatter in your head while you're doing it is not very realistic. You really need to hear what it sounds like from the outside and then see what it is you need to work on. So there probably are people who naturally have more of it, just as there's probably some people who naturally are more harmonically inclined or melodically inclined. I don't think Paul McCartney works on his melody writing, or not in the way that we might work on time or whatever. So you can always work on stuff. But at the same time, don't be afraid to, play to your strengths and try to amplify the stuff you're good at. I mean, yes, work on your time. That's a bedrock thing that all great musicians have, is good time.
All the time.
All the time. Well, it's true. Like, think, who do you think, when you think of a guitar player with good time, who do you think of?
Paul Simon.
Okay. Right. All the time.
All the time. Yeah.
I don't know how he got there, but he's got it. Do you know?
Good time doesn't mean on all the time, does it? That's the thing. It's not like rigidly on.
Then I'm amazing.
All the time, because there's plenty of guitar players we can think of whose styles are just behind.
Yeah.
And some that we can think of, they're probably not ahead, but they are so on it feels ahead.
So my favourite jazz guitar player is Pat Martino.
I knew we were going to get to Pat.
Right? And I listened to Pat play.
And I was thinking of Albert King.
And he connects
who's literally in the last bar.
You're right. But Pat connects with me, and there's this urgency about his playing. And every time I hear him play, I'm just going, come on, Pat, because it just connects with me. And he's pushy as you like.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's a reason behind that. When he plays like that, it's not just playing fast to play fast. He's going through those lines, and there's nothing is left to chance about that stuff. There's a purpose for every note, and there's a purpose for where the time is with every phrase, and that really connects with me. But the same thing, like when I hear George Benson. There's this amazing clip of George Benson playing with Frank Sinatra in Quincy's band, and he's doing this intro to this tune.
That just kept going up.
And it's like, and just to bring it, just tying it all back in.
God was conducting.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And he just plays this line, and the time is so beautiful, and it just puts you in this place. And I think that's the thing with understanding how being able to manipulate that and the emotions of that. There's so much emotion being carried in that, and that's when I hear you play, and it's like you can go there or you can go there, and it's like, and it all says something different. It's amazing. Just the hope that there might be able to learn something like that.
Once again, asking for a friend. I do. Some of my favourite bits on Spry are the when you're behind.
Yeah.
The anticipation of what's about to come, and there's no hurry to get there, and I think it makes you feel relaxed as a.
It's really beautiful.
Listener. And
really
then there's
beautiful.
some resolution, and that push and pull. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, there's a level of trust. When you trust the other people you're playing with, then I know I can go a little sideways, but we're going to still get there at the same time, when the phrase resolves. And so a big part of it comes down to that, like trusting the people that you're with. And that whole, when I was talking before about like playing smaller things on the guitar because you don't need to do other people's job, it's a little bit the same with rhythm. Like, it's not one person in the band's job to like contain all of the things. Like, it's all push and pull. And when the listener hears it, they're hearing how it all plays off of each other. This is really subtle stuff. Like, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to teach. But if you listen to your favorite records, there's probably plenty of it going on.
Yeah.
And if you try to play along, you'll start to discover these things. Yeah.
Have you stayed disciplined in terms of routine and practice? What do you do? What's your approach to that?
No, I'm somebody who, I'm very much in the like, do as I say, not as I do. There are times when I'm very disciplined about my practice, and it's always rewarding. I never do it and wonder why am I doing this? Like, it always works. So it's nice when I'm on the road, like I have been for the last 2 weeks, because whatever I do in the daytime, I'm definitely going to play guitar for 90 minutes in the evening. So if I can get a little bit more time in the day to do the particular things that I want to work on, just warm up things that I do and stuff, then that's even better.
Yeah.
But it's still 90 minutes with the guitar in hand is good.
It's good, yeah.
And at home, if I'm between tours, I don't usually do that. So there's just a certain amount of even separate from practice, just playing the guitar for that kind of time every day makes a difference. I do get into phases of discipline with writing where I'll make myself write. And that is a little easier to stay on track because then you get a return. If you just practice every day and you don't have the opportunity to play on stage, you might not see the benefits.
Sure.
Immediately. Eventually you'll see them. But if you spend an hour writing something and then you've got something that is a piece of music, then it's like, oh, goody. Like, that's really rewarding, So, and I still consider that all practice.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't have to be fingers all the time.
Flexing the same bit of the brain. And moving on from that then, just before we hear Adam play again, aside from the writing, the solo career, playing with other artists, the recording and all of that, you also do a bit of educating. What is the most common hurdle your students come up against? What are you constantly having to go over with everyone?
The most common thing is people are not playing what they hear. They're playing patterns.
Right.
A lot of times I'll ask a student, can you play Happy Birthday on the guitar? And they can't, or they can, but it takes them, it's very hunt and peck. It doesn't have to be Happy Birthday. It could be, some kind of nursery rhyme.
What a great phrase, hunt and peck. Yeah. I think we can all relate to that.
The album.
Yeah.
Hunt and peck.
And if you can't do that, then stop everything else you're doing. Literally, whatever you've been practicing, stop doing that and figure out how to play simple melodies on the guitar. Because if you're not, then nothing you're playing is actually connected to what's inside your imagination or your ear. You're just, you're disconnected. So that's the biggest thing.
That's fantastic.
Play simple melodies.
Yeah.
Wow. So nursery rhymes, TV show themes.
Much harder than it seems, really. I won't put you guys on the spot,
Please
but well,
let's do it.
All right. Let's see. Happy Birthday in C.
In C.
Great. So harder than it
Yeah,
seems, right?
yeah.
It should
Some of those
be.
intervals is like, oh, hang on. Yeah.
Right. And so that's really like, to me, what ear training is. Like, I know people like to use apps and stuff for ear training, but to me, it's like, oh, just hold on. How about just think of a tune in your head? Like, put the guitar down for a minute. Think of a tune, and then pick up your guitar and play it. And be able to play it, not just, like, okay, we're in C.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great place to play in C. But find another place to play,
Sure.
and find another place. And then try it in a different key or a different register. That is, I think, going to be helpful down the line as much as anything else. So if you can play melodies, and then the time feel you work on by playing with a metronome, playing with records, playing with a friend if you can, and just be conscious of right now, like anytime you're practicing anything, you are working on melody, and you're working on your tone, and you're working on everything. But you can only really focus on probably one thing at a time. So just, okay, right now I'm going to do the same dumb thing I did yesterday, but I'm just going to think about rhythm today, And then maybe tomorrow I'm going to do the same dumb thing I did yesterday, but I'm just going to think about my tone and my touch and the velocity of the pick. And then the next day I'm going to play the same dumb thing again, but now I'm going to work on, phrasing and try to really make it sing, all of those things. I think it's hard to do all of that all at once.
Yeah.
And at the opposite end of that, do you find that when people come to you, what they want to know is the seventh mode of harmonic minor or whatever it is? That's what they come to you with, this grand desire.
No.
Oh,
thankfully,
good.
No. I'll tell you that the two kinds of students that I get most of the time are, it's funny how it's really the same thing, but just through another lens. I get young people who've just graduated from jazz school, like living in New York, they'll be like, oh, I just graduated from the New School. That's a school in New York. And the first call I got to do a gig, it's with my friend who's a singer-songwriter. And it turns out nothing I've been studying for the last 4 years is useful on this gig. Please help me.
Yeah.
So that's one kind of student I tend to get. And the other is, I'm the songwriter. I've been playing my same songs my same way forever and ever. I want to get some jazz in there. I want to learn more about how to get around. So really, it's this. They're at the same crossroads, but they're just coming at it from not the same direction. And I guess what I do is at that crossroads, and so people come to me more for those things than for the seventh mode of the melodic minor.
That's good to hear. It's nice to hear that there is a musical desire in their needs. Look, we could talk. I think we could talk for weeks with Adam about all kinds of things. We didn't really get into the pedal board. As you can see, the ratio of 2 utility pedals and 2 noise pedals is the kind of ratio serious guitar players go for, right? As you heard earlier, something like a deluxe reverb. Benson Nathan Jr. is something you'd go for.
That's what I've got at home, yeah. On the road, usually I'm just using a deluxe reverb because they're everywhere.
Yeah, and that's, I said to Adam today, what amp would you like? He said deluxe reverb, happy days. Got it to its happy place.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay,
Thank you so much, man. This has been, I'm inspired.
Good.
It's as I said, we could talk for weeks. Perhaps we could hear you play the acoustic a little bit, Adam.
Sure,
and,
I'll be glad. Oh, you mean?
Yeah, no. And we should also mention, so please check out Adam on YouTube. What's the channel name?
Guitar Tips. The whole name is Adam Levy Guitar Tips.
Adam Levy Guitar Tips, so please check that out. New music next year, did I hear you say?
Yeah, I've got, there's a record that I made with my friend Rich Henman. He's a great pedal steel player. So we've got a record coming out in May. Liz Wright's new record comes out mid-April, and I'm going to record a new record later this year, but that's not even in the can yet. So.
I will do my best to put links to all of the above in the description below.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep. Cheers, buddy.
Perhaps we can, perhaps you can play us out
Sure.
something on the acoustic guitar.
Sure.
Beautiful.
Man, that was awesome. Wow.
Adam Levy, thank you very much.
Cheers, buddy.
Do all the stuff. Put the description down. All the links are in there. Thanks to our patrons on Patreon. We really appreciate you guys. Please go to that Pedal Show store and buy merch. That's how we keep the lights on. Please do that.
Indeed.
And other stuff. Links for which are in the description.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thanks again, mate. Thanks, everyone. Take it easy.
Yeah.
Bye.